Roe versus Wade is a landmark decision by the U.S. Supreme Court that's ruled that the Constitution protects a woman's right to choose whether she has an abortion or not. Now, the conservative talk track says that President Trump is the right candidate to fight against abortion and would ultimately choose Supreme Court justices that would overturn Roe versus Wade. But my question for you today, is that actually the case? Does that thought process make sense? That's what we'll talk about today in this episode of the Work It Out podcast. I'm Vaughn Sanders, lead teaching pastor at First Baptist Church in Bolingbrook, Illinois. This is the Work It Out podcast where I answer everyday questions from a biblical perspective so that you can be strong and courageous in living out your faith. As we spring forward to the November elections that are coming up very shortly, and also with the recent death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, there's a lot of discussion about the role that the president plays when it comes to progressing the pro-life movement and possibly even overturning Roe versus Wade. The Guttmacher Institute, while they lean pro-choice, they do provide some statistics that are very good and reasonable and aligns with a lot of the other statistics that we see around abortion from CDC and other organizations. In general, statistics show that the abortion rates are at an all-time low at this present time, and this is since it's been legalized in 1973. The data includes both medical abortions, which includes the abortion pill, but also surgical abortions as well. According to the Guttmacher statistics, there was a peak in the 1980s where every 1,000 women, there were about 360 women who actually got an abortion. Then we start to see a downward spiral when we get into the 1990s. Contrary to popular belief, the president does not have a measurable effect on the abortion rates. While President Trump did cause Planned Parenthood to withdraw from the Title X program over the rules to provide abortion counseling, Planned Parenthood still receives a good amount of its funding from taxpayers. In their 2019 annual report, Planned Parenthood boasts record high abortions and record high government funding, despite all the things that we've seen in the news and throughout the media. In 2019, Planned Parenthood received about $615 million in taxpayer funds. And also with that, there was a 9% increase over 2018. And then we see its affiliates earned about $80 million from bailouts due to the pandemic. So let's not pretend that this current administration is aggressively making headway in dismantling the abortion centers. Arguably, George W. Bush signed more impactful legislation when he signed the Born Alive Infant Protection Bill or the partial abortion ban. But even those, while fundamentally very strong, they still only chipped away very little at the pro-abortion initiative. We've got some links in the description box so you can go and check my math and you can see where all these statistics are coming from. Not only does the president not have a measurable effect, but also the Supreme Court has been more about status quo than change. Recently, the Supreme Court weighed in on Louisiana Act 620 that would require doctors those doctors who perform abortions to be on staff and in good standing at a hospital no further than 30 miles away from the location that the abortion is given. And this is so that they can admit any of those patients in case there are complications and they needed some extra medication or they needed some other types of surgery or services. Of the 9 judges, all of them except for one, appealed to Roe versus Wade or Planned Parenthood versus Casey in order to strike down this particular Louisiana 629 bill. All except one again, and that one was Clarence Thomas. He was the only one that was the dissenting vote in this that supported this bill so that they would have more restrictions on abortions that were taking place in Louisiana. He is the only one that cast abortion rights in doubt. Even President Trump's most recent Supreme Court appointment, Brett Kavanaugh, chose to block this bill that would ultimately hold abortion clinics and doctors more accountable. So when we consider President Trump's latest court nominee, Amy Coney, there are some things that might be a little bit troubling if you expect her to play a part in this fight against the pro-choice movement. Amy Coney has publicly stated that Roe versus Wade is the law of the land, and she will faithfully apply Roe and all other Supreme Court precedent. And she has also said that she agrees that in the constitutional right for women to obtain abortions. When providing an answer as to whether she agrees that abortion is immoral or not, because Ms. Coney is a professing Catholic, she states that while the Catholic Church teaches that abortion is always immoral, she says, and I quote, her views on this or any other question will have no bearing on the discharge of her duties as a judge, unquote. So we've got to really think about this and understand that for some extended purposes, we're fooling ourselves to blindly believe and think just because someone has a Republican on their ticket that they would uphold and stand for the things that we think they should from a conservative perspective. We are calling these conservatives to call judges that will stand for people who cannot stand for themselves, here namely the unborn child. And while the new Supreme Court appointee has said very, very clearly and has been exhibit to even sitting Supreme Court justices, they have no goals into overturning Roe versus Wade or doing anything that might upset the apple cart. Finally, even if Roe versus Wade is overturned, it really doesn't prohibit the majority of abortions, unfortunately. This seems to be the holy grail for many conservatives and evangelicals, but the issue is much more complicated than this. If Roe is overturned, then what that means is each state then would decide how they're going to handle abortions, if they would allow them or not. With the decision in the hands of the state, while most states have done everything they can in order to restrict abortions, there are others who have gone out of their way to expand access to abortions. So what do we do? Where do we go from here? What I'd like for you to hear today and be very clear about is you are now more or less a Christian based on the person that you cast your vote for in November. Jesus was neither a Republican nor a Democrat, although he did ride a donkey into Jerusalem on his triumphant entry. So, yeah, just strike that. That's a joke. Don't don't take that for anything more. But the reality is that these political candidates, these political buckets that we ascribe to, don't necessarily holistically serve us as Christians. They don't ultimately serve, and they're not in complete alignment with what we read in the Bible, whether it's Democrat or Republican. There are things in both of those policies that would misalign with what we believe from a Christian perspective. Christians should absolutely fight for the rights of the unborn, because the reality is they cannot advocate for themselves. They're unable to do that. However, we've got to go even further than that. We need to take the gospel with us wherever we go. We need to be building relationships, and we need to be sharing the gospel. We will inevitably share the gospel with single men and single women, and they would be able to see and understand that they are fearfully and wonderfully made in God's image. They will be able to understand and know that God cares for them and has a plan for them. God has reserved sex for the confines of marriage and reflects Christ and his bride, the church. And so that as we join together as one, that we are in reflection of Christ and his bride, the church. For those considering abortion, we should avail ourselves to them so that they can understand that adoption is a very good and solid alternative to killing their unborn baby. Christians are known for being against abortion, but I'm afraid that we just don't go the extra mile. We don't go the extra mile to exhibit grace and love for others, especially in their time of need. Evangelicals are accused of only being pro-life before the baby is born, and then after the baby is born, then we have some other restrictions on them. We need to dispel that myth, because that is not the example that Jesus laid out for us in the gospel. Jesus said that they would know us by our love. So I would love to continue this conversation with you. Feel free to write some comments in the chat box down below. Ask any questions, any clarifying things that you might have there. But we definitely need to do more. We should expect more out of the politicians that we choose to support. So thanks again for joining me on the Work It Out podcast. This is Vaughn Sanders, and be strong and courageous in living out your faith today.